What a great feeling to be invited on a podcast, especially when it comes out of the clear blue. When you get a LinkedIn message that says, "Dear Tom, we'd love to have you on the podcast to promote you and your company to our tens of thousands of listeners and really focus on you." It's a little bit of an ego thing. So instantly you go ahead and click through and say, "I'd love to. Let's schedule a time." And here's the funnel you find yourself in. Well, first you have a discovery call, and it's not with the host; it's with one of their associates. And it's a 30-minute call, and they're getting all kinds of background information about you, on your business, your background, your issues, and you're like, wow, this is a really in-depth pre-interview call, and you're impressed. It's like, wow, they have a really great system here. And so after that, then they're like, yeah, we would like to have you on the podcast. So they schedule the appointment with the host at that time. And you get on with the host. You're already, I mean, you're looking good. You're sounding good. You've done your sound check. You've gone through the checklist, all of that. And you jump on this call, and it's a very quick podcast interview. It's very programmatic. They're asking you the same questions, getting to it, and next thing you know, the short podcast interview is over. But the host wants to talk to you about how they could help you and how they could work with you about your business. And you realize this is a sales call. This is not a podcast interview. And the half hour goes up, they're on to their next client or prospect there. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that was a waste of time, but a lesson learned. And then you get the non-ending pipeline. You get the nurturing sequence where you're getting emails all the time where they want to work with you. And you realize that you were just set up, you weren't invited. Now, I'm calling this out because it's been used so many times and it's becoming predominant in podcasting, and it's hurting podcasting. There's even a name for it. It's called the Trojan podcast. Now, that's not the name I use for it. That's actually the name that the people that are teaching it are using for it. Remember the Trojan horse? It's like beware the gift. The story is the Greeks couldn't get into the city of Troy for over a decade, right? They couldn't get through the walls. They couldn't get through the gatekeeper. So what did they do? They made a present. The present got inside, and then they jumped out of it and they attacked. And that feels exactly like the slimy thing that is going on in Trojan podcasts, right? They can't call you and do a cold call and get a half-hour sales call with you. So what they do is they reach out with the Trojan podcast. Here's a gift. I'd like to have you on my podcast. And then, they have the sales associate, the admin rep get all of the background information, and then the podcast, quote unquote, is with the closer. It's slimy, it's bait and switch, and it's everything that podcasting should not be. Podcasting should be a conversation. It should be authentic. And I really fear that some of these people that are doing this, promoting it, teaching it, are really messing it up for everyone. Now, there's the right way to do this. And if you want to see the right way to do this, I'm going to point out three people here. Tiffany Youngren, great podcast. Actually talked with her before the podcast. She talked with somebody on our team and said, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? So I chatted with her a little bit before the podcast. We had a great interview on the podcast. It was an actual conversation. And then I liked her so much, it felt like a natural fit. I mean, it's a great way to get people to know, like, and trust you. But you don't do that through, just setting people up with the Trojan horse. Another one that teaches this and does this wonderfully is Stephen Wassner from Predictive ROI, and he's got a great podcast called Onward Nation. And his point is if you want to be seen as the leader in your industry, well, then interview the other leaders in there. It's a great way to build relationships, but don't make it transactional. The third person I would point to that really does this wonderfully is a gentleman by the name of James Carberry. He's over at Sweetfish Media. He's got a great podcast out there, and he also has an amazing book. It's called Content Based Networking. Now, James is one of these super connected guys. I joke that he's one of those guys that couldn't get convicted in any county in the United States because you probably couldn't find a dozen people that don't know him and love him. But he talks about using content to build a relationship and a network with somebody. So with that, if I reach out to you and say, hey, would you like to co-author a book with me, or would you like to participate in this seminar that we're doing? I've got a stage. Would you come and speak at my stage? Or even something like, hey, could we do a podcast together? Let's do this content, and that builds a relationship. It builds a common interest. It builds that trust. And I think that's the right way to do it. You see, today it's never been easier to sell something online. I mean, you can always con somebody into something with the Trojan horse or the bait and switch, but that's not building a business. Businesses are built on relationships. Podcasts are a great way to get a relationship. Being a guest is a great way to go out there and build your network, get seen by different people, tap into other people's audiences. Having your own podcast is a great way to nurture those leads. It's a great way to nurture and educate your clients. It's a great way to be seen as a thought leader. It shouldn't be abused and used. So let me leave you with three things. 3 ways that you can avoid being a victim of the Trojan podcast. First, ask questions. If somebody invites you on the podcast, well, it's easy just to say yes. But ask some questions more about what it is, what they focus on, how you can bring the most value. Often podcasts will have one sheets or brief sheets just on their podcast, and it's very easy for them to send that over and says, this is the podcast. Here's how long we've been around. Here's some other guests. Here's what we focus on. And you can look and say, is that a fit or isn't that? The other thing is look at previous episodes. The other day, I got invited to be a guest on this great podcast. It was a Trojan podcast because when I looked it up online, they hadn't published an interview since June of 2019. I really don't think that they were going to bring back the podcast just for me. So if it sounds too good to be true and there's no interviews out there, it's probably a Trojan podcast. Finally, I would just give you permission. We're all polite. We don't want to insult anyone, even when we've been taken. Be very quick to just say, I don't think this is for me at any time, and just walk away from it. Unsubscribe. And if they keep sending you stuff, then mark it as spam. It's that awkward thing. And it's today the modern day equivalent of what I saw 30 years ago, where I get invited over to someone's house for a brunch or a barbecue, something like that. And it's like, wow, this is really taking this relationship to the next level. My wife and I are invited over there. That's really nice. And then you get there and you realize this wasn't an intimate brunch or a friendly brunch or a family barbecue that you got invited to. No, it was an Amway pitch, and you just got pinned into the driveway. Now, you don't have to be that. If somebody lies to you, if they set it up as a bait and switch, it's okay. And I'm telling this to myself too. It's okay just to say, I don't think this is working for both of us. Thank you very much, but I respect your time just as you respect my time, and go on from there. Let me know what you think of Trojan podcasts. Have you ever been on one? Have you been pitched by one? Do you see it as a trend, or have you avoided it so far and hope to avoid it in the future? Let me know your thoughts below. I appreciate you. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others, and share that on targeted podcast interviews.